You know that feeling, right? Where you feel totally powerless, like you have absolutely zero control over what happens, what people do around you. It's pretty unbearable, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, who actually wants less power?
No one. And our source material really hits the nail on the head. It states, the feeling of having no power over people and events is generally unbearable to us. No one wants less power. Everyone wants more.
Exactly. And that's why we're here today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a deep dive into a book that always seems to stir up discussion, Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power.
Oh, it's definitely a book that gets people talking. And we've got some really great resources for this dive, including some excellent YouTube audiobook recordings.
Yeah.
They do a great job of bringing those historical stories to life.
Absolutely. And for our listener, we want to be your guide, sort of like curators, walking you through the often hidden world of power dynamics.
Right. We're not telling you which way to use this knowledge, but we do want to arm you with the awareness to recognize these dynamics at play.
It's about equipping you to navigate these situations with more clarity and less of that feeling of being totally overwhelmed by forces you just don't get.
Exactly.
Our aim today is to break down some of Greene's most interesting laws, using the historical examples our sources provide. And we're going to tackle them head on, even the ones that might raise some ethical questions.
Oh, definitely. There are a few in there that spark some debate.
Always keeping in mind, of course, that we're examining the ideas in the source material, not necessarily endorsing them. So, with that out of the way, let's jump right into a really fundamental one. Law number 1, never outshine the master.
Ah, yes, a classic. This law gets to the heart of how those in authority think and feel. The key here is understanding that their sense of security often comes from feeling in control and competent.
So it's about understanding the psychology of power, right?
Exactly. And this law suggests that to really thrive, you need to make those above you feel superior. Show off your talents in a way that kind of flatters them. But most importantly, avoid anything that might accidentally make them seem less brilliant or capable than you.
Right. And our source material offers a fascinating and kind of tragic illustration of this with the story of Fouquet and Louis XIV. Can you break down what happened there?
Absolutely. Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister for the young king Louis XIV, was a man of immense wealth and impeccable taste. To solidify his standing with the king, he decided to throw this extravagant party. And I mean truly breathtakingly extravagant.
Like over-the-top, lavish.
Oh, completely.
Oh.
Imagine nonstop spectacles, dazzling fireworks displays, theatrical performances going on for hours. Everyone there was just astounded by the sheer opulence of it all.
So he was basically going all out to impress the king.
Exactly. He wanted to prove his loyalty and also show Louis that he was capable of serving him with unparalleled grandeur.
Sounds like a party for the ages, something people would be talking about for centuries. But it backfired, didn't it? That's where this story gets really interesting.
Oh, it did spectacularly. Instead of feeling grateful or even impressed, Louis XIV felt completely overshadowed and deeply insecure. Every single dazzling display, every admiring glance directed at Fouquet by the other guests, chipped away at the king's sense of being top dog.
So he was trying to show his devotion, but Louis saw it as a threat.
Essentially, yes. Fouquet's brilliance as a host inadvertently outshone the king himself. Louis saw it as a blatant display of personal wealth and power, a power that rivaled, maybe even surpassed, his own.
Wow. Okay, so what's the lesson here for our listener, for their own lives? How can they avoid making the same mistake as Fouquet?
It's a great question. Think about times in your own life, maybe at work, where your enthusiasm, your competence, even though well-intentioned, might have unintentionally made someone higher up feel threatened or uncomfortable.
I think we've all been there.
This law isn't about hiding your skills or achievements. It's about being super aware of the psychology of the people above you. Strategically position your strengths in a way that reinforces their leadership instead of accidentally challenging it.
That's a great point, really nuanced. Okay, on to law number 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Now, this one definitely has a bit of an edge to it.
It does, and it goes against what we're usually told. Greene's argument is that while we naturally lean towards trusting our friends, those relationships can be shaky. They can be vulnerable to envy, shifting loyalties, all that messy stuff.
Right, and enemies, they're more predictable.
Exactly. Enemies can actually be useful, strategically speaking, if you understand their motivations.
Okay, I see where he's going with this. And our source material provides a pretty stark illustration of this with the story of Michael III and Basil. What happened there?
Okay, so Michael III, the Byzantine emperor, takes his former stable boy, Basil, under his wing. He shows Basil immense favor, elevates him to prominent positions. Essentially, he treats Basil like his closest confidant. He ignores the advice of more experienced advisors and really puts all his trust in Basil.
Wow, so he's betting everything on Basil.
He is. He showers Basil with wealth, titles, even arranges a marriage for him to the emperor's own mistress. I mean, talk about trust, right?
It's almost unbelievable, but it goes wrong, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. Big time. Basil, surrounded by all this luxury and power, develops a huge ambition for more. And he's clever about it. He starts planting seeds of doubt in Michael's mind, whispering about potential rivals, particularly Bards, who was head of the army, and, get this, Michael's own uncle.
So Basil's manipulating the situation to his advantage.
Exactly. And it works. Michael ends up ordering Bards' assassination. And who carries out the deed? Basil himself. Shortly after, Basil steps right into Bards' powerful position, consolidating his own influence.
Wow. So he uses the emperor's trust to get rid of his rivals, but that's not even the worst of it, right?
You're right. The ultimate betrayal is still to come. Years pass, and Michael finds himself strapped for cash, mainly due to his own lavish spending habits. So he asks Basil, who by now is swimming in riches, to repay some of the money he had borrowed.
It seems like a reasonable request. What happens?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But Basil not only refuses, he does it with a shocking lack of respect. And suddenly, Michael sees the trap he's fallen into. This former servant now controls a vast amount of wealth, has a network of powerful allies, and essentially holds more power than the emperor himself.
That's a terrifying realization.
It is. And just a few weeks later, Basil makes his move. Soldiers murder Michael, while Basil stands by, doing nothing. And with Michael out of the picture, Basil declares himself the new emperor.
That's chilling. What's the lesson here? It can't be to distrust everyone.
No, not at all. It's about having a realistic view of human motivation. Even in close relationships, self-interest and changing circumstances can play a role. As for enemies, it's not about being hostile. It's about understanding their moves, their weaknesses. Their predictability can actually be an advantage. You can predict their reactions or even use them as a contrast to highlight your own strengths.
That makes sense. Okay, let's move on to law number 3. Conceal your intentions. This sounds like something straight out of a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it? The basic idea is that if you keep your true goals and plans hidden, you keep everyone else in the dark, off balance.
And when they don't know your intentions, they can't really counter your moves, right?
Precisely. That's where you gain a big advantage. Our source tells a story about a con artist called the Yellow Kid. Quite a character.
Oh, this should be good.
So the Yellow Kid sets his sights on this wealthy guy named Giselle. He figures out Giselle's weaknesses, his desire to be part of the elite, his love for easy money.
Sounds like an easy target.
Well, the Yellow Kid cooks up this elaborate scheme, a completely fake deal to buy a street railway system. This becomes his smokescreen, a believable distraction that completely consumes Giselle's attention.
So Giselle thinks he's getting in on this big investment opportunity.
Exactly. All the while, the Yellow Kid is setting up a rigged boxing match designed to fleece Giselle.
So the railway deal was a total fake.
Completely. Giselle is so caught up in the supposed legitimacy of the railway deal, the potential profits, the imagined social connections, that he misses all the obvious red flags about the boxing match.
Like what?
Well, like the fighter who's clearly out of shape, the overly enthusiastic promoters, things like that. But Giselle doesn't notice.
Because he's focused on the railway.
Exactly. The Yellow Kid's real intentions, the con involving the boxing match, are hidden until the very last moment. He even stages the death of the fighter, complete with fake blood.
Wow.
It creates panic, and Giselle flees the scene, leaving behind a huge sum of money. And that, of course, was the Yellow Kid's goal all along.
So it's all about misdirection.
Exactly. How can our listeners use this principle, hopefully in a more ethical way?
Yeah, good question. We don't want anyone running off to become con artists.
It's about being strategic with the information you reveal and when you reveal it. If you announce your plans too early, you open yourself up to opposition, you allow competitors to adapt or even steal your ideas. By keeping your ultimate goals under wraps, you can control the narrative and maintain that strategic advantage.
That's a good point.
Think about negotiations. If you reveal your bottom line too early, you weaken your position. Or in project management, where you might roll things out in phases. This allows you to make adjustments based on early feedback without revealing your whole strategy. It's all about being deliberate with what you communicate and when.
Makes sense. Let's move on to law number 6. Court attention at all costs. This one feels especially relevant in our super connected world.
It does, doesn't it? We're bombarded with information all the time. Greene argues that when it comes to power, perception often trumps reality.
So it's about how things appear, not necessarily how they actually are.
Exactly. To gain and maintain influence, you have to stand out, become a focal point, appear larger, more interesting, more captivating than the average person.
And our sources offer two fantastic examples of this, P.T. Barnum and Mata Hari. Let's start with Barnum.
Barnum, a true master of spectacle. He really understood that creating buzz, any kind of buzz, was essential for success. He famously said, "Every crowd has a silver lining." And he used some pretty outlandish tactics to grab attention.
Like what?
Well, our source mentions this thing with the brick man. He hired someone to walk around carrying a brick just to pique people's curiosity and draw them into his museum. He even hired terrible musicians to play outside, knowing that the awful music would drive people inside for some peace and quiet.
That's wild. So he was willing to use anything to get people talking.
Anything. And then there's Mata Hari. Her lure was built on a completely different kind of spectacle.
Right, she was more mysterious.
Exactly. She created this persona shrouded in mystery. She would constantly change her story about her origins. One minute she was Dutch, the next she was raised in Java, deeply connected to ancient Indian dance.
So she was playing with people's perceptions.
Absolutely. Her exotic performances, which hinted at nudity and the forbidden, captivated Parisian society. Ambassadors, wealthy industrialists, powerful politicians, they all wanted to see her perform.
She became a sensation.
Oh, completely. And the crazy thing is, very little was actually known about her, but that just added to the mystique.
So she was a master of creating an image.
Right. When she finally gave a public performance, the crowds were so huge, they almost caused a riot. Both Barnum and Mata Hari, in their own ways, understood that generating a powerful image and captivating the public was central to their influence.
And that image didn't even have to be entirely real.
Exactly. Barnum embraced any kind of attention, good or bad, as long as people were talking about him. Mata Hari crafted this aura of mystery and allure, allowing people to project their own fantasies onto her. They both knew that visibility and intrigue are major assets in the game of power.
How can our listener use this principle in their own lives? I mean, not everyone wants to be a showman or a mysterious dancer.
That's true. But it's about recognizing the importance of your personal brand, how you present yourself in your field.
So it's about standing out in a positive way.
Exactly. In a professional context, this could mean developing a unique communication style, becoming a great storyteller about your work, or proactively finding ways to make your contributions and expertise more visible within your company or industry. It's not about being outrageous, but about being memorable and capturing attention in a way that serves your goals.
Great advice. Okay, let's get into law number 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. This one seems a bit ethically questionable.
It does, doesn't it? This principle is about leveraging the skills, knowledge, and hard work of others to advance your own agenda.
So it's about using other people's talents to your benefit.
In a way, yes. And making sure you get the recognition for the achievements.
Okay, and the example our source gives involves Tesla, Edison, and Westinghouse. A story of innovation and, you could argue, exploitation.
Definitely a complex story. Nikola Tesla worked for Thomas Edison, and he made huge improvements to Edison's direct current, or DC, dynamo system.
Edison was the big name at the time, right?
He was. And apparently, he even promised Tesla a substantial reward if he could completely redesign the dynamos. Within a year, Tesla delivered a significantly improved version.
So he fulfilled his end of the bargain.
He did. But while Edison was happy with the advancements that his company would ultimately benefit from and take credit for, he claimed his promise of a reward was just a joke.
No way. What did Tesla do?
He was understandably furious. Edison offered him a tiny raise, which Tesla refused. He quit soon after.
So that was the end of their collaboration.
It was, but Tesla went on to develop the revolutionary alternating current, or AC, system. Edison, of course, opposed it fiercely. But Tesla found a new partner in George Westinghouse, who saw the potential of AC and generously funded Tesla's research, even offering him substantial royalties.
So AC was Tesla's breakthrough.
Absolutely. And it eventually became the standard, powering the world as we know it. But here's the thing. Through a series of complicated business maneuvers, Tesla was largely denied the financial rewards that should have come with his invention. Even public recognition often went primarily to Westinghouse rather than the true inventor.
That's so unfair. Tesla did the groundwork, but others reaped the rewards.
Sadly, it happens.
What's the lesson here for our listeners?
It's a reminder to be vigilant, to be aware of these potential imbalances and collaborations. You have to advocate for yourself, make sure you get the recognition you deserve for your contributions.
Right, don't let others take credit for your hard work.
Exactly. And it also highlights the importance of protecting your intellectual property. Understanding the power dynamics in any partnership is crucial.
On to law number 10, infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. This one seems to be about the company we keep.
You got it. Greene's argument is that emotional states are contagious, just like physical illnesses. Being around negative people or people who always seem to attract bad luck can rub off on you.
It can bring you down.
Exactly. And our source offers a dramatic historical example. Lola Montez and King Ludwig I of Bavaria. Quite a story.
Lay it on us.
King Ludwig fell head over heels for Lola Montez, a woman notorious for her scandalous behavior and unpredictable personality.
Sounds like trouble.
It was. He showered her with gifts, made her a countess, and gave her a lot of political influence. But Lola's behavior became increasingly outrageous. Our source mentions accounts of her physically attacking people who annoyed her.
She sounds like a handful.
Oh, she was. And the people of Bavaria who had loved their king started to lose respect for him. They saw him as being under Lola's spell.
Her bad reputation was rubbing off on him.
Exactly. Ludwig even dismissed anyone who dared to criticize her. The public unrest eventually boiled over into riots, almost pushing the kingdom into civil war.
Wow, so their relationship had huge consequences.
It did. Ludwig was forced to send Lola away, and shortly after, he abdicated his throne.
So Lola's negativity, her scandalous actions poisoned his reign.
Exactly. His association with someone who brought instability and public disapproval had irreversible consequences for his power and legacy.
That's quite a cautionary tale.
It is. But it doesn't mean we should abandon our friends when they're going through a rough patch.
Right, that wouldn't be very supportive.
It's about being aware of the impact that consistently negative or unstable individuals can have on your own life, your goals, and even your reputation. Recognize when an association is becoming harmful and set healthy boundaries to protect yourself from being dragged down.
Makes sense. Law number 15 is a bit hardcore. Crush your enemy. Totally. No room for second chances, according to Greene.
That's the principle, yes.
Yeah.
No half measures. Greene argues that effective leaders throughout history understood that a feared enemy has to be completely eliminated.
And they often learn this the hard way.
Often, yes. The example provided is the conflict between Xiang Yu and Liu Bang in ancient China.
Yeah.
It was a long rivalry with many twists and turns.
Tell us more.
Xiang Yu made a crucial mistake. He repeatedly showed mercy toward his rival, Liu Bang. Even when his advisor, Fan Zhang, urged him to seize the opportunity and eliminate Liu, Xiang hesitated.
He underestimated his enemy.
He did. Liu Bang, on the other hand, used every reprieve to rebuild his forces and eventually turn the tables. Even when Zhang had Liu cornered and offered peace terms, Fan Zhang warned him against it. But Xiang, hoping to bring Liu back as a subordinate, showed restraint.
Big mistake.
It was. Liu used the negotiations to escape. This pattern repeated itself. Xiang would show mercy, only to face renewed opposition from Liu. Until finally, Liu Bang trapped Xiang's army. Despite Xiang's desperate attempts to negotiate, Liu pressed his advantage, leading to the complete destruction of Xiang's forces and his eventual suicide.
So he paid the ultimate price for his mercy.
Yes. The historical interpretation is clear. Leaving an enemy with any chance to recover is incredibly dangerous.
It's a pretty ruthless law. How do we apply this in a modern context where crushing your enemy isn't exactly acceptable?
It's important to focus on the underlying strategic principle, rather than the literal interpretation of destruction.
Okay, so it's more about neutralizing threats.
Right. In today's world, it could mean completely outmaneuvering a competitor, strategically undermining opposition to a project, or fully resolving a conflict to prevent it from resurfacing.
So it's about being decisive.
Yes. The question is, do hesitant or incomplete measures against a determined opponent ultimately create more problems down the line?
Makes you think. Okay, law number 18. Keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. Sounds like a recipe for keeping everyone on edge.
It is, according to Greene. The logic is, if you keep people guessing about your next move, they can't formulate a solid strategy against you.
So it's about throwing them off balance.
Precisely. And the classic example is the famous chess match between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky. It was a match full of bizarre events.
Oh, I've heard about this. Wasn't Fischer known for being a bit eccentric?
He was. He would arrive late for matches, make unusual demands about the playing conditions, even forfeit a game early on. And it all seemed to unsettle the normally calm and collected Spassky.
Mind games.
Exactly. And during the games themselves, Fischer would make unexpected, sometimes unorthodox moves that seemed to disrupt Spassky's concentration and planning. While Spassky did manage to win one game after a blunder by Fischer, the overall effect of Fischer's unpredictability and unconventional approach played a part in his eventual victory.
So it wasn't just a personality quirk, it was a deliberate strategy.
That's the interpretation. By keeping Spassky guessing about his strategy, even his mental state, Fischer gained a psychological advantage.
How can our listener apply this principle without seeming completely erratic and unreliable?
It's about strategically introducing elements of surprise and calculated unpredictability into your interactions, particularly in competitive situations like negotiations or business dealings.
So not being predictable.
Right. You don't have to be unreliable or dishonest. Just avoid falling into rigid, predictable patterns of behavior that others can easily figure out and exploit. Keep your opponents guessing, make them hesitate, make them more cautious, and they might be more likely to make mistakes.
That's a great strategy. Okay, on to law number 28. Interaction with boldness. Hesitation is the enemy, according to this one.
That's right. Greene argues that if you have doubts about a course of action, it's better not to attempt it at all. That lack of confidence will show in your execution and undermine your efforts.
So it's better to be bold even if you're unsure.
Often, yes. The source gives the example of Christopher Columbus approaching the King of Portugal to fund his westward voyage to Asia.
Now, Columbus wasn't exactly a proven explorer at that point, was he?
Nope. He had an embellished background and limited navigational experience, but he went in with a bold proposition. He didn't just ask for funding, he demanded grand titles to be viceroy of any lands he discovered and a huge share of future trade profits.
He was aiming high.
Incredibly high. And while the king ultimately rejected the proposal, he didn't mock Columbus or dismiss his demands outright.
So he made an impression.
He did. The source suggests that by setting such a high value on his unproven venture, Columbus conveyed a sense of confidence and self-belief that resonated with the king, even though the proposal was considered too risky.
That initial boldness probably helped him secure funding from Spain later on.
It likely did. It reinforced his own belief in his mission.
So what's the takeaway for our listener? Fake it till you make it.
Not exactly. It's about understanding that sometimes, especially when you lack experience or credentials, approaching situations with confidence and making bold requests can actually elevate your perceived status and open doors that would otherwise remain closed. It's about projecting conviction, even when you might feel a bit uncertain.
Okay, last but not least, law number 29. Plan all the way to the end. Long-term thinking is key, it seems.
Absolutely. Greene emphasizes that the conclusion of any endeavor is the most critical part. You need to plan every step meticulously, anticipate obstacles, unintended consequences, and consider the possibility that unexpected events could derail your success at the last minute.
And even allow others to take credit for your work.
Exactly. The example given is Vasco Núñez de Balboa's discovery of the Pacific Ocean.
I remember learning about him in school. He accomplished something amazing, but his story ends tragically, right?
It does. Balboa's ultimate goal was to find El Dorado, the legendary city of gold. His journey across the Isthmus of Panama and his discovery of the Pacific Ocean was a monumental achievement. News reached Spain, and he was initially hailed as a hero.
So he achieved his goal.
He did. But before the news even arrived, the king had already sent Pedrarias Dávila to arrest Balboa, driven by suspicion and political maneuvering. They shared governorship for a while, but conflict arose between them. Balboa, still obsessed with finding El Dorado, organized another expedition. Despite incredible hardships, he reached the Pacific and began preparing to explore and conquer the Inca territories.
So he was on the verge of even greater achievements.
He was. But Pedrarias, consumed by jealousy and political scheming, had Balboa arrested and executed before he could capitalize on his discoveries or enjoy the rewards of his hard work.
So he achieved his immediate goal but failed to account for the long game.
Exactly. He didn't fully anticipate the political machinations and the jealousy of his rivals, which ultimately led to his downfall right before he could realize his full potential.
What's the key takeaway for our listener?
It's a powerful reminder that achieving a goal is only part of the battle. You have to think strategically beyond that immediate goal, anticipate challenges, consider the actions of your competitors, and be prepared for the unexpected. Lasting success requires ambition and hard work, but it also demands comprehensive long-term planning that accounts for all possible outcomes right to the very end.
Wow. This has been an insightful and at times maybe a little unsettling deep dive into some of the key principles from the 48 Laws of Power. We've talked about understanding power dynamics, using perception strategically, and the importance of thinking ahead.
And we hope that our listener can use these laws and the stories behind them as frameworks for understanding their own interactions, both professional and personal. Remember, we're not advocating for any particular behavior, but we want to equip you with the knowledge to better navigate the forces at play in your life.
So as you think about these principles, consider this. In a world that often rewards overt displays of strength and direct action, what's the true power of understanding unspoken motivations, hidden insecurities, and the long-term consequences of our actions and the actions of others? That's something to really think about. And maybe with a deeper understanding of these dynamics, you can wield a bit more influence in your own life.